You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Wednesday the 11th of September 2013. Vince Cable attacks government's 3,000 visitor bond yet again. Criminal on community service given £73,000 for twisted ankle. Birmingham College bans religious veils for security reasons. Centre-right wins Norway election. The average Somali immigrant costs Norwegian taxpayers more than €1 million. Denmark, the biggest mega mosque in Scandinavia. In Asia, 1 in 4 men have committed rape. Only in Florida, execution delayed so politicians can attend fundraiser. Thought for the day, young Asians are victims too? And finally, could roving Sikhs catch on? Now today is a notorious day in the history of the Western world, because whether we like it or not, the United States, despite all its differences to the old world, will still be the bastion of Western civilization long after we are, if we are not careful. It is the day when a clutch of shabby, ultra-religious maniacs murdered nearly 3,000 innocents in a series of self-styled jihadist strikes or revenge attacks for military interventions abroad. Everyone knows what they are doing on this day, and no one will ever forget it, whether they be adherents of the various and many conspiracy theories that have inevitably cropped up with monotonous regularity. What we must as nationalists remember is not only the terrible loss of lives, but what it has cost us in Western pride. Most of the people who died were Europeans like ourselves, and although divided by a culture and language, they could have been us. The 7/7 bombings in London were, I'm afraid, a very poor imitation of the real thing. 9/11 must always be remembered as a time when the enemy without became the enemy within. Requiescat in pace. Rest in peace. UK news. Vince Cable attacks government's 3,000 visitor bond yet again. Is it the BBC or Vince who can't give up and say it's a good idea? Vince complained loud and hard in June when the government announced plans to require visitors from India, Nigeria, Pakistan, Kenya, Sri Lanka and Bangladesh to pay a £3,000 cash bond in return for a visitor visa to allow them to stay in the UK for up to 6 months. Now the BBC is rehashing the story with Vince Cable says Sarah Tether overreacted by standing down as an MP. Vince Cable has criticised plans to make some overseas visitors pay the bond to enter the UK, and he claimed Theresa May's version of the plan would harm relations with important trading partners such as India. The bond idea, to be piloted from November, is aimed at deterring people from high-risk countries staying in the UK once their short-term visas expire. Mrs May says the problem of so-called overstayers was one of the biggest challenges facing the immigration system, and they want to target visitors from certain countries who present the greatest risks. World at 8 thinks the bond is a blooming good idea and should be expanded to include many more countries. Criminal on community service given £73,000 for twisted ankle. A criminal who hurt his ankle while cutting back brambles for community service was paid £73,000 compensation, it emerged today. Probation service bosses admitted this morning that offenders who injured themselves doing unpaid work had claimed hundreds of thousands of pounds of taxpayers' cash. One convicted criminal was given £94,666 after he broke his arm falling from a ladder while doing community service with Surrey and Sussex Probation Trust, while another got £18,600 after injuring his back using a wheelbarrow. World at 8 states, I think my listeners know exactly what I'm thinking on this one. Birmingham College bans religious veils for security reasons. Muslim students have been banned from wearing religious veils into a college because of fears regarding security. Teenagers at Birmingham Metropolitan College have been told to remove any items of clothing covering their faces so they are easily identifiable at all times. But while some students welcomed the move, arguing it keeps them safer, others called it disgusting. The ban of the niqab, a veil which leaves a thin slot for the eyes, has caused some female students to enrol at different colleges. World at 8. Good for them. Why don't they leave the UK altogether? European news. Centre-right wins Norway election. Norway's centre-right opposition has swept into government with a clear majority, ending 8 years of Labour rule. The Conservative Party and its allies won over voters with promises of tax cuts, better health and elderly care and stricter rules on immigration. With 99.7% of the votes counted, the four right-wing parties were projected to win 96 seats compared to 72 won by the outgoing centre-left coalition, well beyond the 85 needed to secure a majority in Parliament. World at 8. You can see the way the pendulum is swinging amongst sensible populations, can't you? Will we be the last elephants in the room in the UK? The average Somali immigrant costs Norwegian taxpayers more than €1 million. According to Finansavisen, a newspaper, an average Somali and their descendants cost 9 million kroner net. That's €1.123 million. And this figure assumes that his or her child is perfectly integrated in Norway. The paper emphasises that this is an average figure and that Somalis, like everyone else, have large individual differences amongst themselves. Of the non-Western immigrants, Tamils from civil war-torn Sri Lanka come off best. Because of their participation in the workplace, their cost is only 1 million. Finansavisen notes that the major differences between the neighbouring countries of India and Pakistan. An average Indian who settles in Norway generates a cost for the state of 1.6 million kroner. A Pakistani costs the equivalent of 5.1 million. World at 8 comments, and we in the UK are continually blasted with the benefits of enrichment, despite the fact that, like most heavily enriched countries in Europe, we are going broke at an alarming rate. Cause and effect, maybe. Denmark, the biggest mega mosque in Scandinavia. Denmark gets its first minaret. Construction crews in Copenhagen have raised Denmark's first minaret, a 20-metre, 65-foot tower-like structure that will alter Copenhagen's low-rise skyline, as the finishing touch on a colossal project to build the biggest mega mosque in Scandinavia. Construction of the minaret, which was finished on September the 3rd, marks the final phase of work on Denmark's first ever purpose-built mosque, situated at Rovsingade Street in Nørrebro, a heavily Islamicised district in northwestern Copenhagen. The so-called Grand Mosque, which will cater to Sunni Muslims, is massive by European standards. The complex covers 6,800 square metres, that's 75,000 square feet, and will house a domed mosque, a restaurant, a cinema, classrooms, offices, a community centre for the elderly, childcare facilities, a playground and much more, in which is being billed as the largest real mosque in Scandinavia. World at 8 states, this is nothing to be proud of, rather ashamed should we be, like Yoda, yes. World news. In Asia, 1 in 4 men have committed rape. UN points to sexual entitlement, abuse as factors in groundbreaking study. India rape cases may be making headlines, but they're only the tip of the iceberg, according to an unprecedented and groundbreaking United Nations study. The anonymous survey of 10,000 men and 3,000 women in Bangladesh, China, Cambodia, Indonesia, Papua New Guinea and Sri Lanka, home to more than half the global population, found 25% of men had raped their partner, while 10% raped another woman at least once, The Guardian reports. CNN has a breakdown of figures per country. Some 75% said they felt entitled to do so, while more than half cited entertainment value, and 70% said they went unpunished. World at 8 comments, and still we shovel them into the UK. First group of Syrian refugees leaves for Germany. The first group of Syrian refugees have departed Beirut International Airport for Germany, where they will live in temporary new homes as Germany's biggest relocation programme gets underway. Airport officials say the group of 107 refugees left on Wednesday for Hanover, Germany. They are the first group to be relocated under a German programme for up to 5,000 Syrian refugees. UN Refugee Agency spokeswoman Melissa Fleming said Tuesday that they include women at risk, people with serious medical conditions or others with special needs. Unlike the makeshift arrangements for most of the 2 million refugees that have fled Syria's civil war into neighbouring countries, the programme announced by Germany in March gives them the right to work under 2-year residence permits that could be extended if Syria's crisis continues. World at 8 states. The trouble with this is that you will be getting jihadists and their families, as well as Assad's supporters and Christians fleeing the rebels. It will cause sectarianism within a strange country, and we really should learn in the West that a refugee is not necessarily a refugee. You can bet there's a roaring trade going on in these camps now for a definitive label to cash in on. Execution delayed so politician can attend fundraiser. Tallahassee, Florida. At 6 p.m. on Tuesday, September the 10th, convicted killer Marshall Lee Gore was supposed to be put to death for the murder of 2 Florida women. But the execution did not take place. It was not a last-minute pardon by the state's governor or a stay order from the court that held up this ultimate form of punishment. Instead, it was delayed so that Florida's Attorney General could attend a fundraiser for her re-election campaign. According to Florida Governor Rick Scott, Attorney General Pam Bondi's office requested the execution to be moved back to October the 1st. We set the date, the Attorney General's office asked for the postponement, so we went along with that. Scott contends he did not know the date change request was made to help avoid conflicting with Bondi's previously planned fundraiser. Gore's execution had been delayed 2 previous times due to legal challenges, including when a judge halted the former escort service owner's execution to consider whether he was mentally ill. Bondi has strongly supported the state's Timely Justice Act, a new state law which speeds up executions by limiting frivolous inmate appeals. The Palm Beach Post has more on this story, including Bondi's response to criticism over the move. Thought for the day. Are Asian girls victims of sexual grooming as well? Although I realise there are many forms of abduction, rape and so-called grooming, the Muslim communities are at it again, with this article and video reported in The Guardian. It has been the court case of the Sikh girl that has awakened this particular form of kraken from the deep. Anything to take the heat away from the obviously predominantly Muslim male way of handling girls and women. Shaista Gohir, chair of the Muslim Women's Network and author of the report, virtually tells us nothing in this video that we at Pro-Fam and the British National Party have not been saying for many years. In fact, almost the exact words, without saying the word Muslim once, and that is when not referring to the groomers or the victims. The other woman, Sadaya Sultana, a local youth activist in Birmingham, is clearly a British convert to Islam, and both have been hoisted up to close down the various reports on Muslims being arrested and charged. The sad fact is that it isn't the thousands of raped young white girls that has brought this forth, but the one Sikh vulnerable girl that has done the trick. Both women emphasise the grooming process and the vulnerability of the girls, and they might have been talking about all of the reported cases if I hadn't read the headline of Asian girls being targeted as well. The proof of the pudding is in the eating, and although Muslim girls are not treated, in some cases as well as they might be, their eventual ending is not usually in a kebab, but married to some old prat from Pakistan, and no doubt the rocky road to that marriage bed is unpleasant in the extreme. But it is part of the Islamic culture to subdue, rape and beat their women. Fact of life, especially in the poorer communities. Trying to alleviate the terrible problem we have in this country with young predominantly Muslim males targeting underage children in schools is mainly a problem for young white girls, although, as now publicly known, Sikh and black girls are targeted. Both these women didn't show any Muslim female that had undergone this grooming, and what Gohir stated applied to all reported cases of grooming by Muslim males. It could have been a packet of weebles she was talking about, and neither brought up the subject of the ethnicity of these vulnerable victims. Gohir also stated that most of the victims had probably been sexually abused as children and came from low-functioning homes. It was not clear to whom she was addressing, us or them. If there are any groomings carried out within the Muslim communities, they are well hidden under honour killings and forced marriages, and nothing like the plague of sexual grooming and abductions that have been in force and unreported in our country for the last 30-odd years. What occurs within their societies is very different, but now, owing to a vague public grumbling and nationalist sentiments, they're fighting back or trying to. But to no avail. I'm afraid, talking to the hand girls, this face just ain't listening. It is a valiant whitewash job and is being pushed by all papers, The Guardian, to show that the lovely Muslim people suffer themselves from their own males being rather oversexed and violent. I thought it was our old enemy Andrew Norfolk, he of the award for bringing to public notice the grooming scandals of the North, ha ha, that had something to do with this lame effort. But of course he is with the Times, of which the Guardian newspaper printed an article on recently entitled "The Times Retreats from the North by Making Reporter Redundant." My objection to claims like this going out is that they muddy the waters, which is of course exactly what is intended. The literate sheeples will absorb this crap and thus ignore any more grooming scandals, as of course they target Muslim girls as well. It is just the nature of the beast. And yet another thing we have to put up with in the UK, along with halal foods and ethnic minorities growing into majorities. So that's okay then. The publicity stunt of putting on a white convert is hilarious. She was wearing makeup but at the same time fully veiled, and in fact was just as forthcoming with none information as her sidekick. No evidence was produced, rather like the king is wearing no clothes and no one is allowed to question it. I think we can all rest at night knowing that no Muslim girls are targeted in the same manner as those vulnerable non-Muslim girls, of course all of whom are dotty, promiscuous and pathetic. The Sikhs have done one better and have launched a Sikh helpline, which is odd because we have done the same thing last year through the YBMP and Profam. This is also the result of the young Sikh girl as well, but does show what it takes, one ethnic to move mountains that hundreds of indigenous children don't. This is a passage from their helpline. The Sikh Helpline UK is aiming to do this by providing information, creating multimedia resources and encouraging family members and young people to discuss these issues openly so there is fewer young people vulnerable to these malicious gangs. You can help by reading the information, sharing it with others, doing a presentation in your local area and above all speaking to young members of your family so they can be aware. As Sikhs we believe in the saying from our scriptures, treat other women as your mothers, sisters and daughters accordingly, so it is our responsibility to ensure the safety of young girls regardless of their race, religion or colour, as they are also someone's sister or daughter. The regardless of race, creed and colour is mandatory, as is ignoring the Muslim element in the crimes. Actually, just refer to our pink leaflet sent out last year to all schools and avoid double bubble. There was also a petition sent out over the emails, which is very interesting, titled My Daughter Exploited, and is part of the Childhood Lost campaign started by a Ms Blackwood MP and apparently including all the well-known agencies, but not the Coalition for the Prevention of Pimping, however. It is the usual story, and I mean usual because at no time does the religion or ethnicity of the groomers show up. It could have been sodding Martians or even worse, nationalists. I don't find it harrowing as I've heard much worse, but if little known MPs are trolling it around, it must be a good bandwagon to be on. Of course this is if you don't mention the toxic influence of Islam, so much the better, because as we all now know you can't be nasty to the Muslims. The one telling paragraph that is an indictment of our society today is this one. The police kept finding Alice at different properties with these men. On my daughter's Facebook page and mobile phone I found names and numbers of the men, all of which I supplied to the police. But I was told it was not enough for action to be taken. Police should have had the power to prevent these men contacting and abusing my daughter. Yes, they should have, but their hands are tied as well as most of the authorities involved. All these councils and police and churches and mosques, whatever, knew what was going on, as did the Roman Catholics with the altar boys, etc. Throughout history of any country there has been sexual abuse of minors and virtually anything that could be abused. It's part of the nastier side of the human condition and is more prevalent in some cultures than others. You will see at gatherings put together for the now sexual grooming of minors cases all the people that usually turn their sights the other way because it suits them. An entire generation of abused young females is a small price to pay for the powers that be to have to ensure a cowed multicultural society and a beaten down public who are given idiot jobs and many other supposedly more important things to worry about. The word denial is not a river in Africa, it is an entire nation hell-bent on self-destruction at any cost. The police have been told to form small groups of around 2 officers in some really bad areas of sexual grooming and to follow up reports on various stray young girls. They go along to the party houses very politely and the girls are herded out and the officers take them home. The guys have their faces fuzzed out and receive warnings, and that is that, all to be repeated the next day. It is a never-ending cycle of misery for the parents and the girls. No amount of rather badly worded petitions will stop this. Camoran is not interested in the sheeples children any more than Millipede or that new saint on the block, Ferret Farage. And we won't go there with the new Baroness Lawrence, as despite new misinformation, most of our groomed children are white, so no hope there. If the Muslim communities really wanted to stamp out this culture, they would first name it and shame it in English, and then proceed to make public the punishment they mete out to these men within their families. It is, as Mozart has said, it is within their communities and their culture. What they do to their own bothers me not a jot. It is what they do to ours whilst in our country that does bother me. It has gone on too long for petitions and scrambling around trying to get publicity for MPs and journalists who a few years ago couldn't have cared less for the stories that were abounding up in the north. It wasn't until these animals moved south and targeted Asian girls as well that they have apparently woken up from their 100-year sleep like beeping Slooty and just as much of a backslang as that. And finally, could it really catch on? Roving sex. A naked man was caught having sex with a Land Rover parked on the street. A court heard how drunken Daniel Cooper, 24, was stripped off and started grinding against the blue 4x4 Land Rover Discovery. Cooper was caught on CCTV simulating sex with the Land Rover, which was parked outside a takeaway restaurant in Holywell, North Wales. Cooper said he was so drunk he couldn't remember what happened until he was shown the CCTV pictures. Father of 3 Cooper, described normally as being a caring family man, stripped off during a drunken night out with friends. A court heard that earlier shocked revellers had seen him simulate sex with the counter of the kebab shop. Cooper was also seen laying on the floor of the takeaway to simulate sex, with his trousers around his ankles. This presenter says clearly this man has a problem with the kebab shop and thought that the Rover was owned by them, or perhaps he just loves kebabs. Most odd behaviour. I think, well, liking kebabs is. As this occurred in Wales, perhaps there's a lack of sheep. Perhaps they've all been taken off for halal food. You've been listening to The World at 8. I am Lynn Mozart and I wish you all a very good night.